Picture a generation obsessed with curated experiences, chasing status through taste and crafting identities in public spaces. Yet this is not just modern life. In the Song Dynasty, 1 million people in Kaifeng cycled through tea houses, night markets, and poetry clubs, where status hinged on how you lived, not how much you owned. If that sounds familiar, the reasons go deeper, and the consequences have already begun to reshape both past and present. So how did ancient cities end up looking so much like Gen Z's world? And what does it mean for the way we define ourselves now? Meng Yuanlao, a minor official turned writer, left behind a vivid account of Kaifeng's nightlife at its peak in the early 1100s. On a typical evening, the city's main avenues pulsed with the activity long after sunset. Lanterns glowed along the Rainbow Bridge, guiding crowds from one tea house to the next. Young people, clerks, and merchants slipped through open doors, searching for the right blend of music, conversation, and the rarest teas. Inside, the air buzzed with clinking cups and laughter. Some tea houses offered private booths for poetry recitals or chess matches, while others spilled out onto the street with storytellers and puppet shows. The goal was not just to drink tea, it was to be seen, to sample new flavors, and to display a refined sense of taste. Meng describes how the city's youth would hop from one house to another, comparing notes on which venue served the smoothest ground tea or the most delicate pastries. Status depended on knowing the latest trends, one's seat, one's order. Even the time of arrival all mattered. Kaifeng's government extended curfew hours to accommodate the nightlife, recognizing that the city's economic heart now beat in these third spaces. By midnight, markets outside the city walls thrived with food stalls and games. Official records show over 3,000 entertainment venues operating at the height of the song, with leisure and service industries making up nearly a fifth of the city's GDP. Meng's account captures more than a night out. It reveals how public venues became essential for social validation. Young urbanites curated their identities through what they consumed and who they mingled with, much like today's cafe circuits or pop-up events. The tea house was not just a place to unwind, it was a stage for self-presentation, a peer-judged arena where taste replaced wealth as the primary marker of status. In Kaifeng, the rhythm of the city was set by those who knew how to navigate these spaces, blending novelty, reputation, and belonging into a nightly ritual that blurred the line between leisure and identity. A single selfie can launch a brand, but in Song Dynasty Kaifeng, reputation was built in candlelight, not pixels. Li Shishi, the most celebrated courtesan of her era, turned the city's pleasure quarters into her own kind of influencer marketplace. Her evenings did not just draw crowds, they drew the city's elite, poets, and even the emperor himself, all eager to be seen at her table. Song police records and tax ledgers reveal the scale of her appeal. A single night at one of Li Shishi's banquets could cost a guest thousands of yuan, 10 times the fee of a typical entertainer. But money alone did not buy access. Li Shishi curated her guest lists with the precision of a modern VIP event. Entry often required more than payment, a poem, a rare gift, or an introduction from someone already in her circle. The poetry clubs she hosted functioned as early fan communities, where membership was earned through wit, taste, and social capital. Records from the Kaifeng Magistrate's Office show that these gatherings generated not just revenue, but influence. Elite clients competed for her attention by composing verses, gifting silk, or sponsoring themed banquets. with some debts tracked in semi-public ledgers and repaid in favors or future invitations. Li's business model blurred the line between commerce and culture. While she paid the state's pleasure quarter taxes, sometimes as much as 8,000 won a year according to Song-era accounts, her real wealth came from the exclusivity she cultivated. Repeat patronage and endorsements from famous poets like Zhou Bangyan allowed her to command fees rivaling a mid-level official's annual salary. In one recorded instance, a poetry night honoring Qin Guan brought in 2,000 wen in gifts alone. As historian Beverly Bossler notes, Li Shishi's reputation for taste was so valuable that clients paid premiums for the privilege of being associated with her brand, not just her company. In this world, cash opened the door, but taste kept you inside. Status depended on being recognized as someone who belonged in Li Shishi's orbit, a dynamic that feels familiar in a time when influence is measured less by what you own and more by who you know, what you curate, and how you present yourself. The commercialization of persona, once confined to the candlelit rooms of Kaifeng, is now a global phenomenon. The logic remains, in the right circles, taste is currency. A scroll of ancient medical advice sits open on a lacquered table, its columns filled with instructions for perfecting the body and extending youth. Centuries before the first protein shake or fitness tracker, Sun Simiao, celebrated as the king of medicine in Tang, China, compiled prescriptions for a life of discipline, beauty, and resilience. His texts, copied and circulated through the Song and Ming dynasties, became the foundation for a health culture that prized optimization as much as healing. In Sun Simiao's world, the body was a project, one that could be refined through methodical routines. Each morning began with Dao Yin, a set of guided stretches and breath drills. The instructions are precise. Rotate the limbs, align the spine, inhale slowly through the nose, hold, then exhale in measured counts. Turtle breathing, as he described it, promised to circulate qi and expel what he called stagnant pathogens. The logic reads like an early manual for stress management and physical resilience, with a touch of mystical branding. These routines were not just for monks or the sick. Manuals encouraged merchants, scholars, and even courtesans to adopt them, linking bodily discipline to social standing. Sun's herbal formulas carried the same sense of calculated hope found in today's supplement aisles. The Tianjin Wan, the heavenly essence pill, mixed ginseng, astragalus, and goji berry into a daily tonic. Its promise was to beautify the skin, preserve vitality, and slow the visible signs of aging. Other recipes called for rare minerals, sometimes even a pinch of cinnabar or mercury, advertised as catalysts for mental clarity or sexual vigor. The risk of toxicity, now well documented, was rarely mentioned in the original texts, but the allure of transformation was hard to resist. For those who could afford it, these elixirs became status symbols, signaling both refined taste and access to the latest medical trends. The manuals also outlined strict dietary codes. Avoid overindulgence, keep emotions in check, and favor simple congee cooked with 10 carefully chosen herbs. The goal was to preserve Jing, the vital essence believed to be the root of longevity and outward beauty. Sun Simiao warned that even the most potent tonic was useless without self-control. In this framework, health became a kind of moral performance, a visible sign of inner virtue and elite cultivation. By the Song period, these routines and recipes had become part of urban life. Tea house conversations often circled back to new herbal blends or the merits of different breathwork drills. Manuals were copied, annotated, and shared among friends, much like online fitness guides today. The promise was the same, that with the right regimen, anyone could optimize their body, sharpen their mind, and claim a place among the truly cultivated. For every risk, be it mercury poisoning or a failed tonic, there was the hope of transformation, fueled by a culture that prized discipline and visible results above all. A row of embroidered slippers sits behind glass in a museum, each pair impossibly small, some barely 3 inches from toe to heel. In Song and Ming China, these were the infamous lotus shoes, crafted for bound feet. Laws from the Song period regulated foot size, and the ideal shrank to a precise 3 inches. The smaller the foot, the higher the family's social standing. This was not a private ritual, but a public code. Bound feet signaled that a woman did not labor outdoors, that her family could afford servants. The body itself became a living badge of class, visible in every step. Regulation extended beyond the home. By the late Ming, pamphlets such as Critique of Adornments circulated in cities, attacking what critics called the decay of the upper class. One anonymous author railed against the spread of cosmetics, tight robes, and elaborate hairpieces, arguing that these visual codes blurred the lines between gentry and merchant, scholar and artisan. Foot binding, once reserved for the elite, had spread downward, with even shopkeepers seeking lotus-footed brides. The critique was clear. Status had become a matter of surfaces, not substance. For men, the divide ran along the axis of Wen and Wu, refinement and martial vigor. The ideal scholar was pale, slender, and reclusive, his body a testament to hours spent reading indoors. Manuals advised avoiding sun, eating bland congee, and practicing gentle exercises to cultivate a delicate appearance. In contrast, the Wu ideal, soldiers, athletes, and martial performers, favored strength and visible muscle. Yet even here, boundaries blurred. Late Ming fitness guides promoted hybrid regimens, muscle training for scholars and skin whitening for warriors. These crossings drew moral backlash. Neo-Confucian critics warned that obsession with the body, whether through cosmetics or calisthenics, threatened the moral order. A pamphlet from 1620 decried the gymnasium craze as evidence of declining virtue. The body became a battleground for social policing. Officials issued edicts against excessive adornment, while neighborhood gossip measured a woman's gait or a man's complexion as proof of family standing. Status was no longer anchored in birth or achievement alone, but in a shifting grammar of appearance. The visual codes of Song and Ming China, like the metrics of followers, jawlines, or gym routines today, offered a way to claim belonging, but also exposed every deviation to public scrutiny. In both eras, the body was never just personal. It was a canvas for hierarchy, a site where anxieties about class, virtue, and authenticity played out in plain view. Zhang Dai was born into a world of certainty. His family's fortunes rested on the civil service exams, the ancient ladder to power and respect. For generations, the right brushstroke on the right scroll could secure a future. But in the early 1620s, that ladder collapsed. The Ming government, battered by debt and famine, suspended the exams, first for a season, then for years. The official notices were terse, but the shock ran deep. Zhang Dai, like thousands of other young men, found himself adrift. The path he had trained for since childhood simply vanished. In his memoir, Dream Reminiscences of Tao An, Zhang Dai describes the moment with a kind of wry resignation. He wrote, "Exams suspended, we sought fortune in dice and markets, defining self by whims rather than scrolls." He abandoned the study halls and turned toward the city's new pulse, into gambling dens, poetry clubs, and speculative ventures. He wrote, "I was once a Dragon Gate aspirant. Now I am a connoisseur of fleeting joys, a collector of moods." The collapse of the exam system did not just end careers. It fractured identity. The old labels, scholar, merchant, official, no longer fit. Zhang Dai and his peers began to define themselves by taste, by risk, by personal quirks. Some became self-styled experts in tea or antiques. Others drifted from one trend to the next, chasing novelty as a kind of armor against uncertainty. Zhang's memoir is full of reinventions. He becomes a theater impresario, a garden designer, a chronicler of lost worlds. Each new role is adopted with a mixture of irony and longing, as if he is both performer and audience in his own life. This willingness to pivot, to self-brand in the face of chaos, echoes through the centuries. The late Ming world, like today's, was awash in labels and micro-identities. Zhang Dai's generation invented themselves out of necessity, piecing together meaning from whatever fragments were left. In his words, "We were no longer sons of our fathers, but wanderers in the marketplace, trading in stories, not surnames." The uncertainty of the era did not just breed anxiety, it fueled a surge in speculation and self-experimentation. As Zhang Dai drifted from one persona to another, he captured the bittersweet freedom that comes when old institutions fail, and the only constant is the self in flux. A rumor sweeps through Suzhou's pleasure quarters. A single Baoku ticket could change your life overnight. In the early 1600s, with the civil service exams suspended and silver flooding the markets, the city's risk appetite soared. Magistrate reports from 1623 describe crowds lining up outside lottery shops at dawn, clutching slips of paper and pooled coins. The Baoku, part lottery and part speculative investment, became the city's new obsession, drawing merchants, failed scholars, and even minor officials into a nightly ritual of hope and calculation. Suzhou's Baoku boom did not stay in the shadows. Elite families, who once guarded their reputations, began purchasing shares through intermediaries, hedging bets as insurance against lost status. Local gazetteers record a 40% surge in gambling arrests over 3 years, with the city's governor issuing repeated edicts to suppress the trade. But enforcement proved nearly impossible. The Baoku market operated in coded language and shifting locations, moving from tea houses to bathhouses to the back rooms of antique shops. Records show that by 1625, more than 100 shops in Suzhou alone offered Baoku pools, each promising returns that outstripped any legitimate business. The appeal lay in the promise of escape. When old institutions failed, exams, offices, the rhythms of respectable life, risk became its own kind of order. Magistrate Zhang Shilu recorded in his 1624 diary that merchants and scholars alike chased fortune in dice and Baoku, as if the city itself were a wheel of chance. The Baoku was more than a game. It was a way to test fate, to reinvent oneself in a world where the rules had broken down. Speculation became a public performance. Winners paraded through the night markets, tossing coins to street musicians and buying rounds of wine for strangers. Losers faded into the crowd, plotting their next move. The pleasure districts buzzed with rumors of secret strategies, lucky numbers, and hidden patrons. Suzhou's Baoku craze echoed the volatility of modern crypto booms, markets fueled by uncertainty, anonymity, and the hope of instant transformation. Speculation moved from private gambling dens into the center of urban life. When the city's governor ordered a crackdown, the result was a brief dip in visible gambling. Magistrate reports tell a different story. The Baoku simply went underground, and its networks grew even more elaborate. In the end, risk filled the vacuum left by failed institutions. The pleasure quarters became not just a site of leisure, but a laboratory for speculation, where the boundaries between play, profit, and identity blurred with every drawn ticket. Patterns of identity, status, and self-invention repeat because they answer timeless needs. As digital platforms accelerate cycles of taste and belonging, the search for meaning grows more urgent. In 2024, more than half of Generation Z express anxiety about their social roles, mirroring crises that are centuries old. History is not just background noise, it is the algorithm still running. What echoes from the past, we now live stream. Share your reflections below.